General education teachers and special education teachers alike will agree that the goal of reading instruction is to produce competent readers who comprehend what they read. As our classrooms become increasingly diverse with students ranging in academic abilities, some with learning disabilities, behavior disorders, or language differences, we must find methods to instruct reading comprehension that will be effective for all students. According to a report published in 2014 by the National Assessment of Education Progress, over 60% of 8th and 12th grade students' reading skills are below proficient on grade level assessments. Closer to 88% of students with learning disabilities exhibit low to poor levels of reading comprehension. This graph shows results from 2017, which are not much improved from the 2014 report. According to Gardhill and Jitendra, students with learning disabilities often experience significant problems in reading. A primary reason for their referral to special education services is deficient reading skills. Reading comprehension is a critical aspect of reading. As students move into intermediate grades, they move away from learning to read to reading to learn, where the purpose of reading becomes the acquisition and integration of information and knowledge. Because effective reading instruction is vital for children to become independent readers and learners, we must apply great effort in finding instructional methods that teach them solid reading comprehension skills. What evidence-based practice can be used in elementary through secondary schools with both general education and special education students to increase reading comprehension? Story mapping. According to research studies conducted by Idle and Kroll in 1987, through more recent studies of Boone et al. In 2015, the use of story mapping improves reading comprehension in all students and is especially helpful for students with learning disabilities. Boulonnais et al. In 2004 evaluated the reading comprehension skills of middle grade elementary students with learning disabilities before using the story mapping instructional model and after. There was nearly unanimous significant improvement in students' understanding of story grammar elements after using the model as represented in this graph. Here again, we see consistent positive results from a study conducted in 2000 by Babyak, Courland, and Mathis that measured the success of story mapping to improve comprehension in 4th, and 5th grade students with specific learning disabilities. Chavez, Martinez, and Pienta also showed positive results of the effects of story mapping on the reading comprehension scores from their study of 3rd graders with ADHD. Shown in this graph, tests 1 through 4 were taken prior to the story mapping intervention. Tests 5, 6, 7, and 8 were taken during the intervention period. The improvement in reading comprehension is evident. So what is story mapping, and how can we use it in our classrooms? Story mapping is a visual way for students to make sense of narrative text by breaking down the elements of the story into key information. Mathis et al. Define it as a simple graphic representation of story grammar elements. Story map elements are visual prompts which provide support to enable recall. According to Babyak et al., teaching students to use text structure may help them to assume a more active role in the learning process by providing them a strategy that they can apply across a variety of reading contexts. Story mapping is active reading, which can be successfully used across content disciplines. When teaching students how to story map a text, we first must teach the story grammar or story elements found in story maps. These include character, setting, problem, and resolution. Students with learning disabilities have less well-developed story schemata, and that may be a contributing factor to their ability or inability to interact with the text and make necessary connections. Story retellings are often more difficult for students with learning disabilities than their general education peers. Manoli and Papadopoulou's research conducted in 2012 suggests that graphic organizers are conducive in assisting students in activating prior knowledge, gaining an insight into text structure, identifying as well as connecting the main ideas of a text, resulting in better recall and retention of information. Using questions related to story elements of the story structure is effective in teaching students with learning challenges to organize and retain important information in a story. The emphasis on story structure provides a framework which highlights important relations, which in turn leads to deeper understanding of the story. When story mapping, we visually represent character, setting, problem, and resolution. Students, while reading a story or after having a story read to them, will be able, perhaps with guidance, to fill in the map with the elements character, setting, problem, and resolution, thus gaining a deeper understanding of the story itself. There are many ways to teach this evidence-based practice, and so we will review a basic instructional model first. Before introducing story mapping, however, a brief explanation of story elements must be modeled with the students. Explanation of character, setting, problem or conflict, and resolution or outcome should be explained using many visual examples. This part of the mini lesson might go like this. Class, today we're going to learn about stories, story structure, story grammar, and how to create a story map. First, we have to think about what elements exist in a story. Class, think about a story. What stories do you like? A student may say Star Wars. Can you name some parts of the story? Who is Star Wars about? Luke Skywalker. That's the main character. In this case, Luke Skywalker. Then ask students to name a few of their favorite characters from other stories. Here we are engaging students to connect to prior knowledge and making it personal for them, making it fun. Tell them they will have a chance to work with their favorite stories later in the lesson. Getting back to our Star Wars story. Where does Star Wars take place? Where? When? Outer space. Another galaxy. A long, long time ago. That's called the setting. The setting is outer space. I would then ask them what might be some other examples of settings to keep them engaged and connecting to prior knowledge. Some good examples of settings are the beach, a farm, the woods, a haunted house. Moving on to the next story element, we ask ourselves, what does the main character have to solve? What's the problem? That's our conflict or problem. What's the problem in Star Wars? The Empire is destroying and taking over planets. Some of the events that happen as the character or characters try to solve the problem are events or episodes in the story. These are some of the events that happened in Star Wars. Can you think of any others? So what's the how? How does the character or characters solve the problem? What do they need to do? How does Luke resolve this problem of the Empire taking over? That is our outcome, or resolution. Luke stops the Empire from destroying planets and taking over by destroying the Death Star and sending Darth Vader spinning into space. Here's what a finished story map of Star Wars would look like. After introducing students to the basic elements of story grammar, we could have a quick formative assessment to check for understanding by using Harry Potter as an example, as most elementary students are familiar with the basic story. We can begin by engaging the students' interest in the subject by showing a 2-minute Harry Potter movie trailer. Remember to give the students a purpose for watching, such as you watch this movie trailer, think about the story elements we just talked about: character, setting, problem, resolution. I would give the students blank story map organizers so that they can follow along with the story, noting elements as they hear them or see them. In the library, I might read a story while showing it on the whiteboard. This visual prompt could help students see the settings and characters and outcome more easily as they learn the process of story mapping. This part of the lesson could also be done in small groups with text of varied difficulty and varied interests to further engage students and honor their diversity. Or stronger students could read the stories to their peers and help guide them through filling in maps. This is an excellent cooperative learning strategy. Another effective model, after having introduced what a story map is and how to complete one, is to have students skim stories, then spend another 20 minutes or so collectively discussing what they think the elements are. Students in groups could be assigned roles, each student being a leader for one story element. For example, one student would be the character leader, another the outcome resolution leader. One could be the setting leader, while another determines the conflict. This is another way to help students with diverse abilities help each other. Students with more learning challenges could be assigned the role of character leader or setting leader, while the more difficult roles of conflict and resolution are assigned to the stronger students in the group. This way, everyone can have success while learning from each other. I would like to see this as a 2-part lesson, at least, with day 1 being the introduction to story elements. The second lesson would review the story elements of the map with guided practice. Then students could either break into groups or work individually to practice their story mapping skills. This exercise of story mapping should be revisited to reinforce the steps until it becomes possible for students to interact with narrative stories in a way that these elements become a useful strategy in comprehension. Ultimately, reading more deeply will be achieved and comprehension will be an attainable goal for all students. Happy mapping, everyone!